On a recent engagement, I was helping an MIT professor to improve the security and performance of her website. Because her website is where she hosted important information about her lab and her research, so it was very important that it was fast and secure. As her website was hosted on MIT servers, for some reasons I won't go into, it was unlikely I would get the opportunity to do a full pen test, nor was it necessary for our purposes. But I did do a security audit and I found some vulnerabilities. So the website was a WordPress website and it relied on two key plugins. And both of these plugins had a cross-site scripting vulnerability. One of the plugins had an update and that update patched the vulnerability. Great. However, the other plugin was no longer maintained. And this is quite common in the WordPress world. You'll have a plugin that is no longer maintained and then later a vulnerability is discovered, but no one patches it because it's no longer maintained. The current installations of it tend to continue to get used with the vulnerability there. And sometimes new people still install it and use it, they just don't know. So we decided that the best path forward was to take our website, move it to its own VPS so it would be more performant, and to switch to a WordPress theme and set of plugins with no known vulnerabilities so that it would be more secure. And the reason I share this story is to get you excited about the tool that I want to share with you today, WPScan. And you might ask, is this really a necessary tool? Is this a useful tool that pen testers need in their toolkit? And I will answer that question with two questions. And the first question is, out of the 2 billion websites in the world, how many of them do you think run on WordPress? Feel free to pause the video and think about your answer. Okay, here's the answer. Over 800 million websites run on WordPress. That means over 40% of the websites out there. Question number two, how many WordPress themes and plugins do you think there are out there in the wild? Once again, feel free to pause and think about your answer. There are over 30,000 WordPress themes and over 70,000 WordPress plugins. Now here are a list of the most popular plugins that have vulnerabilities. And this is why I want to share this tool with you. WordPress is both wildly popular and has a huge attack surface. Also, it's beginner friendly. That's not a bad thing, it just means that the average WordPress user has the average cybersecurity posture, which is a nice way of saying a really bad cybersecurity posture. And so your clients will likely have websites, and some of those websites will run on WordPress. So, my objective for our short time together today is to give you an introductory overview of WPScan with examples so that you feel confident using it going into your own engagements. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so here we go. If you want to follow along as I demo WPScan, just go over to offsec.com, click on Explore. Under Labs, you'll find Play. And this takes you to the Proving Grounds Play, a set of boxes which are here. They're publicly accessible. You can play around on them, hence the name. And it's a great place to test your skills. So the box that we're going to play around on is So Simple. Well, it's called So Simple. We'll see how simple it is. You can start it up and then you'll get an IP address. So I saved us some time, did a little bit of legwork, and did a TCP scan of all the ports, did a UDP scan of all the top 100 ports for UDP. And we saw that port 80 and port 22 are open, those two TCP ports. So we're going to focus on port 80 HTTP. This is where we will play around with WPScan. So I ran well, actually, let's pop over first to the site. And here we are. So simple, it says so right there, easy, right? Should be super easy. So looks like there's nothing here. There's no buttons, there's no forms. It looks like there's no real content. I always recommend check out the source code. You can just go inspect and take a look at the source code, which is not much. Sometimes there's comments in here. Hi, nothing obvious here at the bottom of the source code. Just look further. This should really say, just try harder. That will change back as soon as I refresh. So looks like there's nothing obvious here. If this happens, It could be there's a virtual host, which means the same IP address is hosting multiple websites, but those websites will have different fully qualified domain names. So it could be, google.com and google.net, for example, are hosted on the same IP address. And depending which domain name you're using, it'll get routed to different resources once it gets to that server. That could be the case. There could be other things we just don't see. There could also be directories or files we don't see. And so we can brute force those. And I already did that with FairXBuster. I'm not going to go through all the syntax here because I'm not demoing this today, but just went through looking for what directories and files might be available. And as you can see here, we found the image on the main website on index.html. Then we found this, which is interesting. It's a 301 response, which means it's a permanent redirect. So interesting. There's a /WordPress. Very likely this is a WordPress website being hosted here. So let's pop over to that. Aha, it is. Surprise, surprise. So simple, so simple. Now that we're here, we know, okay, we have a live WordPress website. Interesting. Before we get into the WPScan tool, I just want to show you how to manually do a WordPress pen test, a small portion of one, just so you can see how it's done. Because I think it's important not just to be a tool slinger or a script slinger, but really understand where do those tools or scripts, where are they actually grabbing information from? And how are they then reporting that information to you? Because sometimes they'll break, sometimes they won't work, sometimes they'll give you misinformation, and you have to know, okay, how can I do this with a different tool or manually? So we're just going to right click, go to inspect. I can read it, but can you? We'll look here under head, and we'll already see, okay, they have this social warfare version 3.5.0 running, and they put that twice. So this could be a giveaway by the person that created this box. Hey, take a look at this. But if you wanted to, you can hit Control F to search, and we'll look for /plugins, if I can spell correctly. Okay. Content plugin social war. Okay, that's the social warfare one. Let's keep going. Social warfare 3.5.0. You can see right there. This is the actual linking of it right there. Down. All right, simple cart solution. Simple cart solution. It's looking like this is the CSS of that. Version 5.4.2. So that could be the version of the CSS, not actually the version of Simple Cart. Let's keep going. Yep. Social warfare again. Okay, here we go. I think, yeah, the dist for distribution. I think this is the Simple Cart solution, version 0.2.0. And you can keep going. So you can look for plugins. You're just looking at the source code and trying to figure out what plugins is this running? What theme is this running? And then you can manually go search the internet. You can search ExploitDB, a lot of places to find out, okay, are there exploits for this? So let's do that. So we found what we think is Simple Cart Solution 0.2.0 and this one, which is kind of the obvious one. We're just going to copy and paste that. Why do more work? Okay. And we'll just look for exploit or vulnerability. And WordPress plugin, social warfare, any version before 3.5.3 remote code execution on ExploitDB. Probably the exploit. I would highly recommend before you run it, I always say this, read it. Make sure you understand what it's doing so that you're not compromised, that your client's not compromised, and that you get the results that you want. I've already looked over this, but you can check it out on ExploitDB. It's, as you can see the title here. And then if you want the number, it is 46794. Great. We found that. We'll come back to this. I don't want us to exploit it just yet. I just want to show you how through manual enumeration, through manual testing, you can do the same thing. WPScan, like all tools, it's not magic. It just makes things faster. It just helps you move faster. So let's do that. So let's actually go through the syntax for WPScan and see what that looks like and how it works. So let's actually just pull up the help real quick. There are a lot of features. And if you type --h, you'll get a more verbose help response. There's lots of things you can do with with WordPress scan, WP scan. The main thing that I use it for is to identify vulnerable plugins. Like I said, there's over 70,000 WordPress plugins. A lot of them are not maintained anymore. And so you can use WPScan to more quickly find those plugins and then know that they're likely vulnerable. Because if some websites you will find might have 20, 30 plugins. Sometimes people have one feature they want to do and they're like, throw a plugin at it. Like, just throw a plugin at it. This plugin does it, let's use it. So going through that manually can be quite time consuming. And WPScan can point to the ones that it believes are vulnerable, and you can start with those just to save some time. So I won't go through everything, all the different things, but you can choose how many threads you want to throw at it, so how fast you want to go through it. If you are getting throttled, lower that number. You can use a random user agent, which is how a browser identifies itself to the web server. I'm Firefox on this version, on this operating system. Combining this with switching between different IPs as a proxy is one approach to go through a website that has lots of links, lots of things to click on, lots of things to check, so that you don't get throttled. Because they identify, hey, the same user agent from the same IP trying to request everything on our website, and you might get blocked. You can use a proxy. That's super useful. Disabling TLS checks, that can be useful because sometimes, particularly in just the hack the box, try hack me, etc. world, they don't do SSL search. They'll just throw it up as, they'll just throw it up and there won't be a cert on it. You can get an API token for free off the WPScan website. I believe it's WPScan later. The API token, it gives you a bit more access, but you can use without a token. Now here's the key thing, the E flag for enumerate. These are all the things that you can enumerate. And let's just start with the default. So what is it actually going to enumerate when you run it? Well, the default is all plugins and config backups. So all plugins here, AP, and CB config backups. But there are lots of other things that you can run through. Lots of other things you can test. I stick with the default is a good starting point, but you can branch out from there. And there's lots of other things you can run. There are password attacks you can run by feeding in passwords and usernames. You can try and be more stealthy. And this is an alias for, it says here, random user agent, detection mode passive, plugins version detective, detection passive. So just want to run you through some of the things you can do. You could read in full on your own, but just want you to have an idea of, okay, these are some of the things it can do. Let's actually take a look at what it does. What does it look like? I'm going to here. So this would be the syntax. The simple way to do it is WPScan -- URL, and then you'll put in the base directory for the WordPress installation. For most websites, they won't have the /WordPress. Most websites will be like, bobsgardening.com. But for this particular one, you have to do a bit more work. You have to use dirbust or gobust or some directory enumeration to find the base folder of WordPress. So here it is. So we'll just run that. Pretty quick. So we'll go back up the top and we'll just go through. When you first run WPScan, by the way, it might ask you to update the database. It'll say, hey, would you like to update the database? Click yes. The reason being that you want the most up-to-date information on vulnerable plugins and vulnerable themes, etc. Because if you don't have the most up-to-date database, you might actually have an old plugin that's not up to date that you're working with, but because your own database that records all of this is not up to date, it might think that vulnerable plugin is up to date when it's not. So we'll start here with interesting findings. So you find out it's, all right, they're running Apache 2.4.41. Great. XML RPC, it seems to be enabled. They found a WordPress README. The upload directory, they found that. External WordPress cron jobs running, could be interesting. The WordPress version, sometimes WordPress itself is vulnerable if they're using an old version. It says here, insecure, released on June 10th, 2020. So that could be one attack vector, is just looking at, okay, is this version of WordPress vulnerable? So we'll just pop over here. Vulnerability. Okay, so for 5.4.2, it looks like, by the way, there's often going to be lots of vulnerabilities, but some of them, for example, this one, very low. What you're looking for, usually, the ones that are high. Deserialization of untrusted data. Okay, that's an interesting one. That was found more recently. SQL injection via WP query. Okay, that'd be an interesting one. Plugin confusion. And you can click on these and get more information. I'm just trying to show you how you can, some approaches, but I don't want us to chase down every rabbit trail. I've done this one before, so I know where it is. WordPress theme 2019. WordPress has a default set of themes that are named after the year in which they're created. So 2019 is from 2019, 2020, on and on it goes. And this one is out of date. Okay, so we found WordPress theme that is out of date. Now it gets into enumerating all plugins and plugin versions. Okay, so we enumerated Simple Cart Solution. And yep, it was version 0.2.0, but the latest version, as it says here, is 1.0.2. So it was last updated in 2022. But because this box research was submitted on 2020, and they were using the latest version of WordPress at the time from June 10th, 2020. So it's 2 years older from the latest update, but even the latest update is 2 years previous to today. So could be some interesting exploit there. And then social warfare. This was updated in 2024. This is updated about 3 weeks ago. But the version they're using is 3.5.0. Okay, no config backup found. We're not using the API token, so that just limits you to 25 daily requests. That's not a problem. And then it gives you some data down here, which is nice to know. Elapsed time, memory used, data received, data sent, etc. Nice to know. Request, that's helpful as well. When you get into larger sites, you'll be looking at this data just to see how fast you're going through it, but not super critical for our purposes. So both of these plugins are out of date. As we saw earlier through the manual enumeration, that is where you'd find, okay, that's where we found the social warfare exploit. So we'd pop over to that. I believe it was on here. Yeah, so we'll grab the exploit DB ID. Already done that, but you just use search exploit and then M and then the number to mirror that exploit. I already downloaded it, so it's asking me to overwrite. There we go. Now we have that in our directory. And the way it works is, if you read it and read the code, there's actually two parser right here. The target is going to be the URL, but there's a payload. And this is the URI where the file payload text is located. So I have a payload here. Very simple payload. It just runs cat etc password. This is just a proof of concept to show you, okay, we use WPScan. WPScan was able to identify the vulnerable plugin, and then we were able to use the exploit for the vulnerable plugin to exploit. So we're not going to go through the full kill chain here up to getting on the system and then getting root and all that. Not a box walkthrough, just WPScan introduction. Interesting. So I'll need to run tmux. And here we will do, we'll do on port 80. PyHTTP for me is just the same as running Python M. It's the same as just running the HTTP server from Python module on port, whatever port I put here, port 80. And then it also spits out the, so it spits out the IP address of the VPN as well. Great. So we'll go back, we'll hop out of here, and I believe the code to run this would then be have that on screen. Python 2. We're running it in Python 2. As you can see here, the target is the base, the URL, URI of the base installation of WordPress, and then the payload URI is here, which is going to be 45198. 45196. Okay, we run this. If it works, then it should grab the etc password file off of the server. There you go. It did. We identified, oh, interesting. So there's a Steven user. There's a system MySQL user, which makes sense. There's always a MySQL. There's a MySQL database when you're running WordPress. Go up here. Web server running. We knew that. News, mail, games, and then of course root. Great. If we were to change that payload txt to be etc shadow, which would have the password hashes of these users, if the web server was running in the context of root, a root user or a high-level user that would have access to it, we could read it, but spoiler alert, we can't. For the sake of time, we're not going to mess around with the payload. Just want to show that that worked. Okay, so now we know the basic usage of WPScan. The syntax is pretty simple. You just pop in the URL and it'll give you the information. So it's just learning to read through, okay, what information is it giving me? How can I parse through that quickly to know what to look for? And when you find vulnerable plugins or themes, search for them. Look on ExploitDB, look on Google, and this is a quick way to find those potential vulnerable paths. One other thing I want to show is if we do WPScan -HH, this will give us the verbose output of all the different options you can run. We're going to go back up to enumerate. Like, what else can we enumerate? And there's an interesting one here, which is user IDs. And so it will go through and try and enumerate the users on the WordPress installation. So let's do that. So it's going to be WPScan URL, and then the enumeration flag, and then U for you. Great. So interesting findings. It has all the same things as before. Has the theme, enumerating users, brute forcing author IDs, and identified 2 users. So we have admin, the default user. That makes sense. There's an admin, but also, and you could have found this if you would have gone on the website. I believe that the admin user had already posted there. So we just go /WordPress. We're over here. Yeah, admin. You can see it right there. So this you could have done easily and manually. It's just go on, find the posts. And on a standard install, it will have the authors listed. Yeah. So great, you could find that. But this Max user, this was brute force. This was using WPScan. So this is useful because when you find users, you can then say, hey, what are some passwords that I've found in other parts of my engagement? I can now try using those passwords with Max. Maybe I can log in as Max. I could try brute forcing with THC Hydra, or even with WPScan. I can try brute forcing Max and seeing, okay, can I get in with him with some just brute forcing passwords? So really interesting when you identify users, you can then say, oh, if I saw Max here, I saw Max in another place, use this password over there. Maybe we can use that same password here. So just want to show you a bit of what WPScan can do, some of the different flags that you can run and information you can get. It's very useful. And yeah, I just wanted to share that with you so that you can use it on your own engagements when you run to a WordPress site. And one final tip, I said this earlier, but it's just worth reiterating, is always remember, tools and automation are for speed, but manual testing is for thoroughness. And if you use each in the right situation, you'll get better results. Okay, stay tuned. I have an interesting series coming up. Until then, have fun, stay curious, and like and subscribe if you haven't done that yet.